Family means they remain together forever, make sacrifices for one another, and help one another out. But that help does not include taking someone's life to put them out of their pain. Unfortunately for Anthony, he did all in his ability to provide his children the greatest upbringing. But when the time came for them to repay the favor, they did so in a way that no one, not even Anthony, could have ever imagined. Today's story of Anthony Tomaselli is about betrayal, heartlessness, and selfishness. So let's look at how Anthony's killers were free to wander before they opened up and revealed a sinister truth that they had been keeping for years. Anthony Joseph Tomaselli, or Tony as most of his friends and family called him, was a very lively man. Anthony was originally from Italy, but he and his family moved to Palm Harbor, Florida in the 1960s. He was a barber by profession, so he started his own small business. He quickly built a strong reputation in the neighborhood because of his drive and commitment to his business. It was not just that, but people described Tony as warm-hearted, generous, and gentle. He adored his family and would go to any length to provide for them. He was a loving father to 3 children, a young man named Charles and 2 daughters, Mary-Beth and Linda. Linda was the youngest, and like all young children, held a special place in their parents' heart. So did she. Tony loved all of his children equally, but he felt a special bond with Linda. Perhaps this is what caused Mary-Beth to become envious and eventually resent her father. After graduating from college in Tampa, Linda went on to earn her certification as a medical assistant, and Mary-Beth used to do a variety of administrative tasks. It appeared that everything was going well for the 2 sisters in this aspect of their lives. But speaking about their love lives, well, that was a little twisted. Not romantically, but rather in terms of their preferences for different types of men. You see, those who knew Mary-Beth's husband described him as a common, senseless hillbilly who left Mary-Beth bankrupt after their divorce. As for Linda, her husband was no better. She often had bruises all over her body and face. Linda's husband tormented her to the point of her purchasing a gun for her own protection. She spent years splitting up and then reconciling with her husband. Even after receiving restraining orders against him, she moved back in with him. Anthony's life nearly came crumbling down when his loving wife died in the late 1990s. But he eventually overcame it and married Shirley Shannon, a new woman, with whom he lived for over 2 decades until she passed away in February of 2015. Anthony, who was 83 at the time, took his daughter's support because he was devastated. However, he was unaware that the sacrifices he had made for his kids throughout the course of his life would be paid back in spades. Anthony was now left alone after the death of his second wife, but shortly after, his 41-year-old granddaughter, Lauren Johnson, moved into his bungalow to help him with the housework and to keep him company. However, Anthony's daughters were concerned about him since they didn't know who would take care of him now that Shirley was no longer around and his health was failing as he aged. Linda and Mary-Beth pushed their father hard to move into the assisted living facility that they chose for him. But Anthony refused to live there. His health was becoming worse and worse as he aged. Anthony had terminal lung cancer and severe dementia. His daughters couldn't bear seeing their father in such misery, so they decided to end his suffering, as they put it. His sisters then set about devising a plan for bringing their father peace, so they made the decision to carry out their plan one evening in 2015. Linda gave Lauren a sleeping pill, who was there in the house that night. After Lauren had fallen asleep, Anthony was made comfortable on the couch while Mary-Beth prepared his usual vodka and Coke nightcap. But this time, she added a fatal amount of sleeping pills to the drink. Unfortunately for them, Mary-Beth overdid the soda in the drink, so Anthony wasn't affected right away. However, 20 minutes later, Anthony felt really queasy. He was trembling, and he even dropped the prayer card he had been reading at night, yet he was still breathing. Linda and Mary-Beth were both in a panic and didn't know what to do. So Linda told Mary-Beth that they had to finish what they had started, which is when they suffocated their father to death. Lauren woke up the next morning and went downstairs to find her grandfather lifeless on the floor with her mother and aunt sitting by him, all worried. Linda had performed chest compressions on Anthony for 30 minutes while Mary-Beth called for help. Anthony had eventually been declared dead by the time the paramedics arrived. Given his age and medical history at the time of his death, natural causes were cited as Anthony's cause of death, but nobody knew that what the world was witnessing was nothing more than a lie. Anthony's wealth was quickly split among his 3 children following his death, and life returned to normal. Linda moved into an apartment with mary-beth in 2017 after finally separating from her husband. Prior to Anthony Marshall entering their lives, the 2 sisters were managing a somewhat regular life. However, soon afterwards, things started to go south for the sisters. Anthony was a musician who worked as a guitarist in a cover band in the Tampa Bay region. He was already married. However, one day in 2018, while browsing Facebook, he caught sight of mary-beth and started a conversation with her. They decided to meet, and Marshall invited mary-beth to one of his shows where they met and started dating. On their 3rd date, mary-beth introduced Marshall to Linda, but she should have realized that she was about to make the worst mistake of her life. It took her 2 weeks to discover that her boyfriend was cheating on her with her own sister. The romance between Marshall and Linda continued. Marshall, however, made the decision to break things up and move on after only 4 months of dating. Linda then bombarded Marshall with messages and phone calls. After he blocked her, she created other accounts through which she contacted him. Marshall had ended his relationship with Linda because, in his opinion, she was mentally ill, which would account for her habit of inundating him with a lot of text messages. However, on February 13th, Linda persuaded him to meet with her since she had a plausible explanation for her odd behavior. Marshall concurred, but he was unprepared for what was about to unfold. When they met, Linda explained why she had been acting so strange. She admitted to Marshall that she was afraid, mostly because she was seeing her dead father. At first, he didn't understand what she was trying to say, but when Linda told him the whole story about how she and her sister killed their father, he was horrified. He couldn't believe his ears, that the 2 women he had dated were murderers. Marshall quickly pressed the record button on his phone and started recording the entire conversation, during which Linda clearly confesses that she and mary-beth killed their father. The way she worded it, though, was that they euthanized their father rather than killed him to end his misery. The very next day, Marshall went straight to the detective office of the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office with the recording he had taken of Linda. The authorities were unable to use his video as evidence, so they fitted him with a wire and sent him to see Linda that same day. The officers listened in, while Marshall and Linda talked to each other about that fateful night. Linda also provided more details, including those about mary-beth. She told him that mary-beth was upset with her father because they had numerous arguments, so she didn't think twice about euthanizing him. She went on to say that mary-beth needed money and was on the verge of bankruptcy, but by selling their father's home, she would be able to pay off her debts. When authorities laid their hands on this compelling evidence, they brought mary-beth in for interrogation. Marshall had already told her that Linda had confessed to killing their father, so mary-beth was calm when she arrived at the police station. However, at the police station, mary-beth gave a quite different version of what they had done that night. She explained to the police how Linda had convinced her that they needed to put an end to their father's misery, and she had agreed since she couldn't stand to see her father suffer. mary-beth even told the cops that her father was struggling for air while they suffocated him. But there was one aspect of Anthony's daily schedule that the police found disagreeable. mary-beth said that he would prepare himself 3 to 4 drinks each day, which was unusual for someone with dementia because he seemed to remember the steps involved in the process. When it was Linda's turn to speak, the police summoned her in, and when they played the recording for her, she agreed to every word and provided an identical narrative. She told the officers that it was all mary-beth's idea, and that mary-beth had a financial incentive to commit this crime. After obtaining both accounts, the police detained them. News quickly spread across the neighborhood, informing family members and friends of the heinous crime the 2 sisters had committed. Even mary-beth's own daughter, Lauren, learned that her mother was a killer via the news. Lauren lived with Anthony, so the police summoned her in for additional questioning. Lauren, on the other hand, had a very different account of Anthony's health. She told the police that her aunt Linda was forcing Anthony to move into assisted living because he required round-the-clock care. She proceeded with telling them that Anthony was still in good standing, driving at age 85, and even doing his own grocery shopping. Even though Anthony had lung cancer in the past, it wasn't present at the time of his death, she said, adding that he had none in his later years. She said that the doctors had just indicated that he might be getting it back after they got his x-ray report, but that wasn't confirmed. The officers arrested mary-beth and Linda on March 5, 2019. They came to a plea deal that spared them from going to court. Both of them were found guilty of the first-degree murder of their father. Linda received a 20-year prison term, while Mary-Beth received a 15-year sentence due to her agreement to give a testimony against her sister. Linda and Mary-Beth are serving the rest of their lives in jail. And as for Anthony, his life was stolen from him. He was a joyful man who was enjoying his life and had plans to do so until he was betrayed by his own daughters. Thank you for watching True Crime Prime. Kindly subscribe to our channel and remember to like, share, and comment.